This morning, we take a journey back in time to the nation's antebellum period. Journalist Kristen Green explores the lives of enslaved people in her new book, The Devil's Half Acre, and it focuses on the painful journey, resilience, and courage of one woman who left an influential mark on education. In Virginia's capital city, trapped between a railroad yard and an interstate highway, a renewed landscape has unlocked the legacy of a stolen people.
I was doing research to learn more about the slave trading district down here.
Research that led to one woman whose story haunted journalist Kristen Green for nearly a decade.
I just couldn't forget Mary Lumpkin. Once I learned about her, I thought her story was so important and needed to be shared.
On assignment in 2011 for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, Green reported on the very place that enslaved woman lived, the nation's largest African-American burial ground, a final resting place for some 200,000. It's right next to the grounds of the jailhouse known as the Devil's Half Acre.
It's here buried under the cobblestones, under 15 feet of filled dirt. They tore down the building and covered it up. Only the foundations remain.
And covered up the history, too.
Yep, they tried to erase it.
That slave industry earned Richmond the nickname Wall Street of the South.
After the transatlantic slave trade ended in 1808, a domestic slave trade that was already in place became more apparent. Jails emerged because people needed somewhere to keep these enslaved people prior to sale, before they could be put together in a coffle and marched to the lower South.
This slave jail was owned and operated by trader Robert Lumpkin.
Robert Lumpkin was known for being incredibly evil, incredibly violent. Not only did he hold enslaved people in his jail, but he also offered to punish them, essentially torture them for a fee.
He owned Mary, too, imprisoned her here, and fathered her 5 children, the first she bore at the age of 13.
There were so many interviews with enslaved people that echoed, her experiences. So many enslaved women recounting being sexually abused by their owners. And so I was able to use the documentation of experiences of other enslaved women to be able to weave that into what her experiences were.
Like so many, Mary Lumpkin survived. And 1 year after the Civil War ended, Robert Lumpkin died, leaving everything to the woman, quote, who resides with me.
She had ensured that her kids were educated. She had ensured that they were freed. She had freed herself. And that she had later inherited this jail, this violent place, and enabled it to become one of America's first HBCUs.
That's because by 1867, she leased the old jail to Baptist minister Dr. Nathaniel Culver, who turned it into a religious school for newly freed black people. The Devil's Half Acre then became God's Half Acre. And by 1899, something more. Virginia Union University, just a few miles down the road.
Our founding mother, Mary Lumpkin, represents for us what it means to experience America today.
As president of VUU, Dr. Hakeem Lucas recognized Lumpkin with this cornerstone and named a street in her honor.
To allow her legacy to be known for providing a jail as a place for education and empowerment is the story that we're constantly shaping for our students.
Over the last 2 decades, activists have launched the restoration efforts of a burial ground and slave trail, one that retraces the forced migration into the Deep South.
This is a part of a 2.5-mile trail.
Virginia State Delegate Dolores McQuinn has been its steward, keeping Mary's gift in perspective.
The first elected African-American governor came out there. We have mayors, we have leaders and pastors, men and women, who also went through Virginia Union University, including myself.
For Green, connecting the long-lost branches of the Lumpkin family tree was a challenge because so many had escaped racism through the generations by denying their birthright.
All I had was descendants who didn't know anything about her and who couldn't necessarily connect to her story because they had lived as white.
But then, just before finishing her book, Green found Dr. Carolivia Heron, Lumpkin's great-great-granddaughter. And while she takes pride in one ancestor, she arms herself against the shame she feels for the other.
I hate the fact that I'm his descendant, and I went to the House of Musical Traditions, Tacoma Park, D.C., Maryland, and brought this to wear as a way of protest, of anger. I had to put the anger somewhere, and this is why I wore this.
For Green, it comes down to the common humanity we all share, one that in her book she links back to Mary Lumpkin.
Before she was anything else, Mary Lumpkin was someone's daughter. Before she was the mother of a slave trader's children and a woman seeking freedom for herself and her descendants, she was an innocent baby girl.
A lot to unpack in that book. You know, so many contradictions, how this enslaver, this cruel enslaver, as so much was written about him, could hand over his fortune to the woman who lived with him as his concubine.
Right.
He must have felt something for her, but the question is, what was it that she felt for him? You know, we deal with this today.
It was fascinating. It's fascinating to me, Michelle, that you have a place that was, you know, physically imprisoned people, that is a place now where you free your mind for education.
Absolutely.
And what that has brought to so many since.
Yeah, it has brought quite a bit. I mean, Governor Doug Wilder, who then went on to Howard University Law School, then became this amazing footnote to history as the first black governor in the United States elected in this country.
And how she was able to go back and just unwind all this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And investigate. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, Ancestry.com played a bit as well.
Oh, that.
Thank you, Ancestry.com.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Great story.